Hey everyone, welcome back to another Ultimate Spider Cast. The big one. This will be part of the 100th episode. Once again, Lilith and I are honored to be talking to Mr. J.M. Dematteis, who's written, basically
everything.
Everything Marvel and DC. Yeah. Hello, sir.
Hey, how are you?
Good. So I know we talked, I think, earlier in the year, but how are you still holding up during this whole, 2020?
Well, I use the phrase that I always use these days, which is all things considered. All things considered, we're okay. And let's see where we all are in a week, shall we?
Oh, yes.
Let's just see.
Hopefully. But no, we're here today to talk to you about Amazing Spider-Man 400, the supposed death of Aunt May.
As far as I'm concerned, it is the death of Aunt May. It is not supposed. I was just we were talking recently. I was doing another interview with Kevin McGuire, and Kevin has this wonderful idea. He said every writer that works in comics, their stories should be there. There's all these multiple universes anyway. Every writer's stories should be a separate universe, which I love that idea. They're all out there, and these universes may overlap in places, so that Aunt May is dead because in my universe that story was real, and Aunt May died and she stayed dead. In another universe, Aunt May didn't stay dead. And I kind of like that idea. What it really underscores is their stories, and if that story holds up, no matter what has been done afterwards, what has been changed, should still be able to go back and enjoy that story for what it is, and not let the things that come later interfere with your enjoyment of that story. One would hope, anyway.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was a beautiful story. It's a beautiful send-off. I don't know why they had to reverse it, but
everything gets reversed in comics eventually.
Yes,
but that one got reversed pretty quick. Craven was dead for 20 years. Harry Osborn was dead for 15 years. You understand, they things, time comes, someone else. We've all done it to each other in comics. We've all undone somebody else's story along the way, and probably pissed off another writer along the way. So I'm not surprised that these stories eventually get undone. This one, I was surprised that it got undone so quickly.
I mean, it was again a beautiful story, and it's just during the whole Clone Saga. I mean,
yeah.
Oh, don't do that, Lil. No, I love the Clone Saga, but I mean, this. Oh my God, I'm like, how could they undo this one? I'm just, I'm the one, shouting for you. It's like, how did they redo this?
Right, yeah. Like I said, I wouldn't have been surprised if they undid it 10 or 15 years later, but I think it was like a year or a year and a half or something. If it was that long.
I think they showed restraint. I think it was maybe 4 years or something.
I'd like to check that out. I don't even know if it was that long. Yeah, I think she came back kind of quick. But whatever. Doesn't matter.
I just love the emotion in it. It just it still gets to me, even though it was undone. Every time I read this issue, it just feels like so fresh.
One of the highlights.
Refreshing too.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
One of my favorite things that ever happened in my entire career was that story came out, and I came home one day and there was a message on my answering machine from John Romita Sr. to say that he'd read that story and it moved him to tears. And growing up for me, Romita Sr.'s Spider-Man, and in many ways still is the definitive Spider-Man for me. With all props to all the other great artists, especially Steve Ditko, who contributed, but for me personally, Romita Sr. Spider-Man. So to get a call from John Romita Sr. to say that to me, that was worth the whole game.
Oh yeah, one of those first artists worked with Stan Lee. I mean, yeah. Basically created the game. Oh, so again, how could they change that? But no, the whole Aunt May story, the whole death of Aunt May, was that your idea, or was that like a?
Yeah, it came up with. Again, it's been a long time. My memory is we were probably early on in the Clone Saga, and the original point of the Clone Saga was one of the points was to let people know that they couldn't get complacent in this universe, because I think one of the perceptions of the character around that time was oh, nothing's ever going to really change. It's always the same old, you know? Mm-hmm. And Aunt May had been around for how many decades? Even at that point, it's the 90s, 30 years, was it? More than 30 years, probably. And she'd been at death's door 100 times. You know, she'd had a fake out death once, I think, when Marv Wolfman was writing the book. But always having always having heart trouble, always having a stroke, this, that, and the other thing. And one of the things we planned on doing when the Clone Saga wrapped up, and our original plan was that it was going to be 6 months to a year, and then it was going to be over, and we were going to reboot the books with Ben Reilly as Spider-Man, a new supporting cast. So we were moving forward, and we thought that, and I think my memory is that Howard Mackey and I were the ones that were really behind this idea. One of the ways to kind of say this is the end of a chapter and the beginning of something new would be Aunt May's death. And then I was tasked with doing that, coming up with the right story for that to happen. And it was a very, my memories, it was, maybe emotional as it was to read, it was very emotional to write. Before I was a Spider-Man writer, the Aunt May character I never thought about either way. It was like, oh, it's his old aunt, always worrying about him. It's like somebody's, the ultimate Jewish mother, always worried, kind of just like my mother. But as a character, I didn't have any resonance with her. Yet and this is one of the great things about, writing, is that then you write a character and you understand them in a completely different way. And I saw Aunt May as this really deep, three-dimensional character with a lot of strength and a lot of fire in her, who had survived so much and was really just as inspirational to Peter, probably more so in many ways than Uncle Ben. So I fell in love with that character. You have to really, in a lot of ways, you have to love a character in order to knock them off too, because you want to give them their due. You don't just want to do some random, oh, Aunt May's dead, she got run over by a truck, let's move on. So we really built up to that story over a number of months when I think she had a stroke, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted that story to be something special, and I pour heart and soul into my work anyway, but a story like that, you really are opening your heart and pouring it in there.
Yeah, I kind of get that, because I was reading some of your Amazing Spider-Mans, leading up to this, and there was that whole confrontation she had with Mary Jane about, they're talking about the whole Peter's parents thing. Mary Jane's like, you and Peter just want to ignore everything and just pretend it never happened. And Aunt May's like, no, I don't just pretend, I know stuff happens, but I just, stay strong for Peter and keep going. And I think that's what kind of helped bring the stroke on, wasn't it?
I don't know if that conversation did, but that's the point. It was a character with great strength. She had been through so much, and can you blame her for worrying about Peter after all she'd been through?
Oh yeah,
just really, really a wonderful, wonderful character. And I always thought that in the Sam Raimi movies, Rosemary Harris, I think that was the actress who played Aunt May in those Sam Raimi movies. It was like she just, for me, it's like she stepped out of the comics and she was the absolute perfect Aunt May. I thought it was a great performance and a great embodiment of that character.
Oh yeah, and and you were saying about the history of these characters and stuff. Is that helpful, or does it kind of weigh on you some, or both? It's like, do you hear all the baggage in your head as you're writing these characters?
You mean like all the continuity?
Like the 30, at this point, the 30 years of history this character had. And
sometimes the continuity is a burden. It's like, oh my God, everywhere I look, there's another chunk of continuity in my way. You can't do this and you can't do that because they already did this and they said this, so you can't contradict that and blah, blah, blah. And you have to sort of take a breath, wade through it, and find the things that are the most important. Find the things with the most emotional resonance that are meaningful, and not worry about all the other stuff. For me, it's about getting to the heart and soul of that character, and not necessarily every single thing that character has done over the years and said and blah 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 blah. You want to get to the essence of the character. It's sort of like when I adapt I've done a lot of these DC animated movies, and I've adapted some comics into movie form, and you're not looking for all the details of that story. What you're looking is to find the essence of the story and translate that essence to film. And it's the same. I never thought about this before, but it's the same thing when you're dealing with 30, 40, 50 years worth of continuity. You can't get lost in that. It's like being being buried in 100 pounds of spaghetti, you know, and you get all twisted up in it. But what you want to do is find that character and look through those stories and get what you feel is the essence of that character and be true to that. Forget all those little strands of everything else. And at least that's what I endeavor to do. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I don't, but that's what I always try to do.
And I mean, do you you did it in this story? I mean, do you believe by this point they've done it before and then they go back on it? Should Aunt May know he's Spider-Man?
Well, obviously, in my story, yes, yeah. You know, I can't address the current incarnation and what should and shouldn't be. My thought was that you know, a lot of times in life we know things and then we repress that knowledge, or we don't want to deal with that knowledge. And that was my feeling with Aunt May, that she sort of tumbled to it really pretty early on, but she never wanted to talk about it because it was too much to deal with. You know, this woman who, and maybe that explains on another level why she was always so worried about him. You know, because if in some part of her mind she knew, and I'm very proud of that scene when they're up on the Empire State Building and she tells him, she finally tells him, and it completely shocks him, and at the same time it kind of liberates him as well, because she's proud of him for what he's done. It's not like, oh my God, you're Spider-Man and I can't believe you risked your life all these years and what were you doing and you know how worried I was. No, it's like she was proud of him. So I think I'm very, very proud of that scene. And then, you know, the actual death scene, I have to give a lot of credit to Mark Bagley. It's very similar to what happened with Sal Buscema when I wrote Harry Osborn's death scene, in that, you know, I'm writing the way we worked was I would write a very detailed plot. The artist would draw from my plot, and then I get the finished artwork and I dialogue from there. So into the plot, I pour all the emotion and psychology and all the things that I want in that scene to communicate that to the artist. And sometimes what happens, like with a scene like this, is you think, well, it's Aunt May's big death scene, and what happens after? I'm going to have to really, you know, pour on the poetry and schmaltz it up and really sell it and to tweak everyone's heartstrings. And we want to, and then the artwork comes in. If you look right in the middle of that story, right after she dies, I think there's 2 or 3 pages that are completely silent.
Oh yeah. After
Aunt May dies, you cut to Ben on the roof and he's weeping. You go to the funeral, which I think is a 2-page thing. And I looked at it and I said, he did exactly what I asked for. He communicated all that emotion beautifully, perfectly, and there was no need to add a word. Once Peter said those final words about straight on till morning and she died, it's like 3 or 4 pages of silence because the art sold the story so beautifully. And all glory to Mark Bagley for pulling that one off.
Oh yeah, he's my favorite Spider-Man artist. I pulled a John Romita Sr. That scene brought me to tears.
Yeah, beautifully done, really beautifully done. That shot of Ben on the roof with the tears streaming down his cheeks is very powerful.
I mean, even later on in the Clone Saga, I mean, it affects Ben Reilly because, you know, for a while he thinks he's the original Peter Parker, and, you know, he goes after the Jackal and he's like, thank you, you know, you brought me in my life. I couldn't even be in the room when my aunt died and stuff.
Right. That's the tragedy for him. He's got to sit on the damn roof and weep. He can't even be in the room.
Lilith?
Oh, I just think one of the great hallmarks of your run is that sense of family that you built into it that is kind of lacking in the newer stuff. And I kind of do really miss it. And I appreciate it.
A sense of family in that, that Peter and Mary Jane were married and they were connected to Aunt May and they were interacting a lot?
They didn't forget about her for issues on end and things like that.
Oh, I see. Is Aunt May not that much involved with the current? I haven't read the current stuff, so I don't know.
She has her own thing, but it's just not the same. It might be nostalgia, but like this is the era that I really love of Spider-Man, and it's just something about family. Like I feel like a lot of superheroes don't have that sense of family and duty.
Right.
So
right. Yeah. Well, that's such an important part. I mean, Uncle Ben, Aunt May. That's that's not just important in terms of family. It's important in terms of his origin as Spider-Man. I mean, it's all intertwined. Runs very, very deeply. You know, I did around that same time. I did Spider-Man, Batman for Marvel. Then I did Batman, Spider-Man for DC. But in the Marvel one, there was in the opening pages, there's like a contrast of what Peter's life was growing up and what Bruce's life was growing up. You know, and no matter what tragedy Peter went through, he had Aunt May. he had someone there who really loved him, who was family. And, you know, Alfred is Alfred, and God bless him, you know, but it's not the same as having your family. And before that, and before the tragedy, he had Uncle Ben. So even though he lost his parents, just as Bruce lost his parents, he had Aunt May and he had Uncle Ben to give him a foundation for life that he always carried with him after that. Whereas Bruce was really kind of cut loose. Think, you know, he was raised by a butler. You know, however much the butler cared about him, he was raised by a butler, which is not the same as being raised by your aunt and uncle who adore you.
And he also had other interests like science and things like that, not just revenge.
Right. So that was Bruce majored in revenge when he went to college. He was the first student to have a revenge major.
I mean, again, this story is beautiful. Even though, I mean, you still even had it worked fine. You had to thread in all those subplots with like Traveler and, you know, the third Peter Parker. Yeah, I mean, all of those are like a one-page thing, but I mean, still, I mean, it worked. Just an important story that doesn't forget what's going on at the moment. I mean, it was a good 400 issue, and then there's even that backup of, you know, Ben Reilly's like first days when he realizes he's a clone and stuff.
Oh, was that in there, or was that I don't remember. Was that the issue that had the story that Stan Lee plotted, and I got to dialogue Stan's plot? Was that in?
That was in here too, I think. Yeah, the one.
Maybe there were a couple of stories in the backup.
Yeah, I mean, there was the Parker Legacy Part 1, and then,
that's with Romita Jr. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there was the one with Stan with like Peter, like right after he gets his powers. Yeah. Yeah,
that was really a treat. I mean, to dialogue a Stan story, that was really to have my name in the credits with Stan Lee was very, very cool.
Yep, right next to
it. Yeah, pretty cool. I forgot. Did I plot it and Stan dialogued it, or did Stan plot it and I dialogued it?
You plot you the plot and Stan the script. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's great. That's even better. Stan putting words to my plot. That's fantastic. You know, and then right around that time, either maybe a year or two later, I got to do a story with Romita Sr. also. The first time and the only time I ever collaborated with him. So, you know, I'm thinking about it now more than I realized it then. It's really incredible. I got to do a story with Stan and a story with Romita. That's like amazing. I know. I always say, if I can go back in time and find my 10-year-old self and tell him, not only will you get to write Spider-Man when you grow up, but you'll get to collaborate with Stan Lee and John Romita. You know, the kid would go unconscious instantly. He'd be so overwhelmed with joy that he would faint dead away, you know? And I never thought about that until this moment, the fact that I got to work with both those guys. What a cool thing.
I know. And I mean, with Stan, I mean, you got to work with the guy who created the character.
Yeah.
All these characters.
Yeah, I know. Really, really amazing. I feel very, very fortunate. Very fortunate.
Lilith, you're quiet.
I'm giving him room to breathe.
I'm breathing. You can ask anything you want. I'm breathing.
No, it's just like I don't want to sound like a fangirl. I don't want to gush. Like, all I have to say is, guys, like, I really have no complaints. I do have a question about the cover that you probably can't answer, but it's an interesting cover.
Yeah. That cover. Let's get into the cover.
What, the tombstone?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, right. No, this is an audio podcast, so no one can see this, right? But they did multiple versions of the cover. But the basic cover that if you went into your comic shop to buy was this tombstone cover. It's a really fun idea, but the way it printed, I remember walking into a comic shop because I really wanted to get my hands on the story when it came out. And I don't often do that. I usually wait for Marvel or DC to send the comps. And it was like, I knew what the cover was, and I couldn't tell what the cover was. It's printed in such a bad way that what is it? Are there words here? Is this what is this weird shape? Is this a tombstone? It was like impossible to tell what it was. But they also did a limited edition white one. Mm-hmm. Which was beautiful, and all the lettering was crisp, and it had a glossy cover. It was really, really great. And I think if you peeled back, you folded back the tombstone cover, there was a drawing underneath it of the tombstone, I think. So you got a sense of what it was. But that cover was one of the great botches of all time, I thought. And it wasn't the fault of anyone at Marvel. It just something weird happened with the printing, and it just didn't work. But it was a great idea.
Well, yeah, I think I remember that the promotion. It was like, "Hey, Parker dies in
Yes.
200. Is it Aunt May? Is it Mary Jane?" You know.
Right. Oh, that's right.
Is it even Peter and Ben takes over? You know, it's
right. That's right. I forgot about that. Well, it was the 90s.
Exactly. He knows. He was there.
We had tombstones and holograms and everything you could think of.
Yeah, I definitely figured it would be like a lenticular cover. Or
I know. Where's our holographic tombstone? Come on.
Holographic tombstone would have been a cool idea. If you ever get to see the white cover, though, that one really, really worked well. It printed beautifully and it's very, very striking. But
probably worth $1 million now or something.
Yeah, I wonder. I've got one copy tucked away somewhere. Yeah.
For retirement.
I was going to say, you signed that. Oh, that'll be worth something.
I'll have to look it up and see what that thing is worth. You know, all these things that I always think are going to be worth $1 million. They're like, you know, they're worth $20 and that's it. You know, if that much. I have yet to come across the comic of mine that's like worth so much money that I can cash it in and pay off my mortgage. You know.
But you still got time.
Yeah.
Right. That's right. There's still time.
But I mean, again, I always keep saying I need to have you back. So I want to talk Child Within one day. I want to talk your Captain America run. But
meanwhile, I'm just chomping at the bit over all the DC stuff. But I'm like, it's Spider-Cat.
Yeah. We gotta do some Justice League. We gotta.
Yeah, the Deathstroke animated movie just.
All right, Deathstroke, Knights and Dragons came out a couple of months ago, and a couple of months before that, Superman Red Sun came out. Mm-hmm. And there's also the Batman Death in the Family, which has a bunch of shorts on it. I wrote 2 of the shorts on there. I wrote the Death short, you know, Neil Gaiman's Death. Beautiful. I'm so proud of that one. And also a really fun Adam Strange short on that one as well. And if we're plugging, let me plug. Please my, I've been doing this Imagination 101 workshop on and off for a number of years, and we're finally bringing it online in November. So it's when I do it live and in person, we do it in one weekend. We're doing it online. We're breaking it up over 2 weekends, 10 hours, a deep dive into the practical side and the metaphysical side and the imaginative side of writing for comics and animation, and really just crafting story in general. It's a really, really fun workshop. I always have a great time. I learn from the students. I think the students walk away with a lot of great material. And we talk and we talk and we talk, and then the last morning we all get together and we create a story together. And all the students go off and then they write their version of the story, which they then send off to me and I critique. And the fun thing is, we all agree on a story, and it kind of I'll tie this back into Spider-Man in a minute. We all agree on a story, and then they go off, and every story that I get back is always different. Even though we all sat in a room and agreed on one story, everyone's interpretation of that story is always fascinating. And that's, to bring it back to Spider-Man, you know, in those days, all the books were intertwined. Mm-hmm. And we would get together like every 2 weeks and have a big meeting and have a blast. We'd be eating pizza or Chinese food and yelling and laughing for 4 hours, you know, and agree on the story. And everyone would go off and write their chapter. And then that isn't what we talked about. What? And that was both the fun of it and the nightmare of it, is trying to coordinate all that with 4 different writers and keep a consistent voice, you know, especially when every writer had a different voice. Anyway, so the workshop is in November, and if anyone's interested, there's 2 places you could go to sign up. You could either go to comixplex.com, comixplex.com, or you could go to my website, jmdematteis.com, and go to the workshop section, and there is a link there that you can click that will take you there. So we still have room in the class. So if you are a creative person that wants to expand your creative base that way and learn more, come join us.
Yeah, I'm not a writer, so what? I'm interested in this, but
everybody's a writer. They just, you know, it takes one story to spark it. That's all. Everybody truly is a writer. Just
I'm interested. I'm like, so what happens? They get to the plot, and then everyone gets to the same story a different way.
Well, that's the last thing. Well, we talk about everything along the way. We talk about creating characters. We talk about the formats for comics. We talk about plotting. We talk about everything. Everything down to dealing with editors and every aspect of writing comics and creating story. And we do exercises, and so we spend days really diving really deeply into it. So the last part that I mentioned is just for the last day, after we've covered all this other ground. So, so this way we're doing 2 weekends, a Saturday, Sunday, then a Saturday, Sunday. So Saturday, Sunday, Saturday, that's going to be all the deep dive. And then the final Sunday is when we put the story together. And then everyone will go off and send me their stories, and I'll send them a little critique after the fact.
That'd be a nice thing on your resume. Yeah, got taught by a author. Yeah. All right. So, anything else on this issue, Lilith?
No, I just, like I said, I just missed this kind of story, the style of storytelling, and I thought it took real like guts to like want to kill off Aunt May. Shocked that they actually let you go through with it. I enjoy it. This is definitely a shock. It was like, oh, because on the cover it's like a death in the family. And you're just like, yeah, right.
Right. They'll never do that. Yeah. Or it'll be a fake out or whatever.
It's a robot.
Right. Kind of what they did with Peter's parents, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We were in the clone saga. It could have been a clone.
Right. But the whole point of that story again was that we wanted to do it for real and do it with real emotional depth and power and. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't, and I'll always own up to my failures along the way. But this one succeeded, I think. It's a story that I'm very proud of, and happily, it's a story that has lived on. And I see when they do lists of top Spider-Man stories, it usually makes the list. And it's a nice thing to know that people still remember and read and reread that story.
And it's so great that you're still active in so many different ways too. I know a lot of the writers from that era are like kind of like not really like into it anymore. So it's just great to still see that you're, kicking and doing things.
Right. When you're creative, you got to keep creating. And some years I'm doing more TV and animation and all that stuff than I'm doing comics. Other years I'm doing more comics. Some years it's back and forth. Some years I'm writing other things entirely. But if no one was paying me, I'd be sitting in a room making up stories anyway. So they might as well pay me, right?
And some people don't even get, I think, like one great story like this around like a character's death. I mean, you've done Craven's Last talked about. I mean, like you said, Harry Osborn's.
You're the go-to guy when they want to kill somebody off, huh? What does that say about you, sir?
I am a comic book assassin, but only on the printed page, not in real life.
The Grim Reaper, he does it in style.
That's right. Well, the truth is that is the ever-present thing that, whether we deal with it consciously or not, is always hovering around our lives. We're all mortal, we're all finite, and that's an issue that we always grapple with, that I've been grappling with and thinking about since I was probably 4 years old. So when you do a story that really deals with it in a deep way, I think it's got to resonate with everybody, because it's something that we all think about at some point. I think it's the rare person who can go through their life oblivious to their own finiteness. That's also the death short that we just did. That's on this new Death in the Family DVD. I mean, obviously the character is death, so it's a beautiful little kind of almost Twilight Zone-y story.
Well, you have experience with that as well, so.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, your TV writing credits are actually pretty amazing. Like I know a lot of people might not know about Earth Final Conflict, but it's a little hidden Gene Roddenberry universe.
I know. I worked on some really obscure stuff. I worked the live action Superboy show, which some people don't even know.
Tyler would fanboy about that.
They don't even know it existed. You know what I mean? And I did some work on that show that I'm really proud of. And it's been a fun ride and continues to be a fun ride.
I'm in awe of your career, actually. It's just so many different but great things. Like, I don't think I've seen one thing I don't like, which is rare for me. Philip will tell you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm sure I could find some things that if I shared with you, you'd go, oh no. But
you have a very interesting perspective, the way that you bring things, even if it's just TV or the animated movies that you do. Everything just has this very you or about it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. You hope that you, and it takes time in the beginning of a career to find a way to express your perspective. Everybody has a unique perspective. We're all different. We all see life a little differently. And especially in comics, I know when I started out You want to, like, I want to be Stan Lee, or I want to be Len Wein or Steve Gerber or whoever it is. So you're sort of, and I want to go back to that old issue and explain what happened between panels 2 and 3 and Avengers 22 or whatever it is, And then eventually you manage to find your own voice and your own unique way of expressing your point of view on the world, and doing it through whether it's a creator-owned book, which is a little more unfiltered, or through these characters. But you want to leave your stamp, and you want someone, ideally, you want someone to know when they picked up a story and read it, even without looking at the credits, that they could tell that it was one of your stories.
And definitely we can say that about you, sir, for sure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
And I love reading your growth too, like as a writer and things. Like it's so amazing. Like from the different things that you've done, you just see that growth, and it's such a refreshing change of pace. Like when I pick up one of your issues from anyone, whether it's Marvel or DC, it's just like, yeah, I miss those days.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the kind words.
I was going to say, be honored, sir. She does not touch like this a lot. I'm like, who is
this?
He
just has such a wide breadth of like work that it's amazing, and it's just nice to be able to like I said, pick up a Marvel book, pick up a DC book, or even watch a TV show that he's written.
But and like to bring it back to this Amazing 400, like is that? Well, I guess comics is like a unique challenge even over like TV or animation or anything, because it's like these branded characters that have been around for decades. Is that always like the challenge? Like you want to make a lasting impact, but it's like years, even decades down the line, someone can be like, oh no, I'm going to like completely change this. Or
right. I think when it's done right, and sometimes I've done it right and sometimes I haven't, kind of going back to what I was saying before, you get to the essence of the character.
Yeah.
And then the other trick is, what can I say after 30 years, 40 years, 50 years that's new?
Mm-hmm.
That brings something unique, a little different to the interpretation of this character, without violating that character, without changing it and pushing it so much that it's really not that character anymore. So I've said this 100 times before, but I'll say it again. It's like I have to saw off the top of the character's head, get a flashlight, and start rooting around inside their psyche and go, oh, look at that corner. I don't think anyone's ever explored that corner before. And that's kind of where the child within came about, just from doing that. So Peter lost his parents. And I know from, my own psychological studies that kids, when they're faced with trauma, one of the ways they deal with it, because they feel helpless and powerless, is to take the blame on themselves somehow. Because in a weird, and it sounds like it's sick, but in a weird psychological way, by blaming yourself, you take back some power. Because when it's not your fault, you're lost in chaos. So I started to think about that with Peter, and I don't think anyone had really, really dealt with the fact of what did it mean for this kid to lose both, all this focus on Uncle Ben and this and that, but he lost both his parents at a very young age. That had to have been traumatizing, and no one had really dealt with that. And that was sort of my door in for the child within. And then with Harry, who was such a fractured psyche, was perfect character to contrast.
It's hereditary.
And then the Vermin character, who until then had just been sort of, even though I created him, he was a one-dimensional little man rat. So it was time to understand who he was, where he came from, and what made him. So between the three of them, and using that theme to unite them, that was a way to tell a Spider-Man story that I hope had never been told before.
I mean... Yeah, it definitely that is your writing, and I want an issue written by Mr. Dematteis here where let's get Peter on the couch, because I mean just all the trauma Peter's been through in his life.
Well, we had Dr.
One thing
Kafka.
We haven't done with him.
Yeah, Dr. Kafka.
There was Dr. Kafka when he came in completely shattered. He came in through the window, and she had to like get him back, and she was always there for him. She was actually based on a therapist friend of mine, so I could
hopefully they liked it.
Oh, she loved it. Yeah, she really did. She used to tell people she was Spider-Man's therapist.
Put that on a business card.
Right, that's right.
I mean, they can do that these days because they've been bringing back Ravencroft and Dr. Kafka. So I mean,
Dr. Kafka's back. I thought they killed her off.
They did. Well, you know how it works in comics.
Yes, I've heard that. So she's back from the dead now?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Now I have to go to Wikipedia when we're done to see when she came back and how.
I don't think they've even explained how yet, but yeah, she's back.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that, because I thought she was a great character, and she especially, for my 2 years there on Spectacular Spider-Man, she was a very important part of that. And then we transitioned her to start running Ravencroft and all that, so she became a. Also, if you watch the evolution of Dr. Kafka visually, as you see the sort of comic book artist mindset take over, because when you first see her, as Sal drew her and as I wanted her drawn, she was a nice looking but very normal woman in her 40s. She wasn't a quote babe, and then all of a sudden a couple of years go by and people start drawing her and she's like this young typical comic book babe looking character. It completely violated the original version of who the character was, but you can't control those things. They have lives of their own.
It's everybody has to be 25 in their prime nowadays. That's the mandate. Right. So.
Right, I know, and Dr. Kafka was definitely a woman in her 40s. At least that was my intention.
But yeah, I loved all that stuff with her and Ravencroft, because it was actually like someone actually like trying to like help people with their mental issues, or even like reforming people. It wasn't just like throw them in a jail cell and lock them away and
give them electric shock.
Right, we did this story on my second run in Spectacular Spider-Man with the Chameleon when he was in Ravencroft, and she was trying to help him. And that was the story that ended up with
help for him. I'm sorry.
It was the story that ended up with Mary Jane beating the crap out of the Chameleon. And Peter and MJ laughing hysterically like, "You defeated the Chameleon all by yourself." I think she had a baseball bat under the bed and just whomped him, is what I think it was. He's a sad character. I also was the one that created the family, the idea that Kraven and the Chameleon were cousins. That hadn't been. No. They were half brothers.
Half brothers. Yeah.
He was the illegitimate half brother of the Chameleon. Yeah. That was me dipping into the brothers Karamazov and stealing a little bit from Dostoevsky. So. Nice. Anyway.
Again, you keep bringing up more stuff. I'm like, I gotta talk to him one day about this stuff.
Well, I'll come back another time and talk about anything you like. I'm happy to do it.
Oh yeah, at Lilith, I think end of the year in December, we're talking his Daredevil run too.
Oh yeah, we are.
Oh, that's interesting. It's so funny. Some of these runs, like when I only worked on Daredevil for a short time, and never got much reaction to it at all. And then all of a sudden, in recent years, people start to bring it up and how much they enjoyed it. And it's like, wow, no one has ever said a word to me about this run for like 20 years. And now all of a sudden, it happened at a certain point some years ago with my Captain America run that I did in the 80s, which when it came out, it wasn't hated, but it wasn't lauded. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, 10, 15 years went by, and I started seeing Captain America coming across the table at conventions. People want to talk about Captain America. And suddenly it catches up somehow. And it's always interesting to me to see how these things play. And we see it in all the art. You see it with movies. A movie comes out, it's a flop, and 10 years later, it's a hit on video or whatever it is, or something like It's a Wonderful Life, which didn't do well, and suddenly, years later, it becomes the Christmas classic.
Cheap syndication. That was the trick.
That's what did it there. That's right. It was on. There was a period in the 80s. It was on every station, all the time, every day.
Much like A Christmas Story.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, it sometimes just takes time for people to find stuff. Like the Daredevil stuff I read when it came out brand new, but like the Captain America stuff from the 80s, like I didn't discover that until the 90s. So
yeah, it's great. Right. Then that's even more fun for me when people that weren't even reading comics then or discover this stuff later. I just got in they dropped off on my porch yesterday the second volume of the Justice League International Omnibus, this giant 1,000-page monster. And I go to conventions and people come up to me that they're just reading this material for the first time and loving it. And, that's what you hope. Same thing happens with Kraven a lot, too. I just read it last week. And you hope to have some work that stays in print and that people can rediscover or just discover for the first time 10 years later, 20 years later. It's fantastic. And I don't take it for granted. I really appreciate that.
I was going to say, is that like the biggest compliment to a writer? Is like, something you wrote maybe decades ago, you were at a different point in your life and it still speaks to people?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm very grateful. And when you think about it, certainly, when we were doing something like Kraven's Last Hunt, everything wasn't being reprinted every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So the mentality was mostly the story comes out, people read it, and it's over now. You know, maybe somewhere it'll be reprinted sometime, but this idea of something being perpetually in print for 30 years, farthest thing from our minds. You know, there's another, I think this fall, there's yet another new edition of Graven's Last Hunt coming out, which I'm always grateful for, because that means a few months later, I get a royalty check. And that's a great thing. When you get a royalty for something that when you get a royalty for something you wrote 30 years ago, it's like you didn't even write it. It's like, you know, what did I do? Oh yeah, I wrote that story. Oh, that's good. They're paying me for it, you know? But really more important than that is that it stays in print and people are reading it and discovering it. And it's a great feeling. It's a great feeling.
Again, if we keep talking, you keep reminding me. I'm like, oh yeah, he wrote that. Oh yeah, he wrote that. He wrote that.
Well, it is a long list, to be fair.
It's a long list, and I'm still writing them, so it's hard to keep up. You know, it's hard for me to remember sometimes. I've had interviews where people are asking me questions about some story, and I answer, and I realize when I'm done that I was thinking about a completely different story. So my answer was completely wrong. It had nothing to do with the question they were asking. And it makes me think about, you know, I'm a big Beatles fan, so I read these interviews that like Lennon gave or that McCartney still gives, where they're asking them about, you know, tell me about that song that you wrote in 1966, you know, and you know that they're like, and sometimes I can even tell as a fan, they're completely off. They're thinking about another song entirely. Come on. You know what I mean? They you know how. So you're a young guy in the 60s. You're on tour. You're in the recording studio. You're making movies, doing this. And yeah, you were going to remember exactly what happened the day that you and John Lennon sat down and wrote that song. Of course you can't, you know? So, you know, I've seen it a little bit with my own career just because it's been so long and I've written so many stories that sometimes it's just hard to keep track. But the big ones, because people ask about them so often, it stays pretty clear. Or am I just remembering all my answers from other interviews? I don't know. I do the best I can to tell the truth, you know, but I always say, you know, take into account that it's been a long time and everybody has a different perspective, and this is the way I remember it, you know?
Oh, how does it feel to have like a bigger catalog than the Beatles?
I never thought about it that way. That's true. The Beatles were only the Beatles for like 10 years.
Seriously?
Yeah, that's right. I've been doing this a lot longer. Interesting. That's an interesting thought. We've had a number of interesting thoughts fly by in this conversation.
All right, we've blown his mind. Any other questions, Will?
Definitely not. Just want to say I appreciate you coming on. It's always a pleasure. You always do such a great interview.
Oh, well, yeah. Thank you. It's a pleasure for me as well.
But yeah, definitely I'll be reaching out to you again at some future date or talk something.
Sure. I'm happy to come back and talk about more things.
Oh, nice.
And,
all right.
And
maybe it'll be DC stuff.
Right. There's plenty of that to talk about too. All right, guys, take care and stay safe and healthy. Okay.
Oh, one more time. Do you want to plug the workshop again? One more time.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. Yes. Imagination 101 is going online in November. If you want to register, you can either go to comixplex.com, comixplex.com, or to my website, jmdematteis.com. Go to the workshop sections, and you can sign up there. Thanks for reminding me about that.
Yes, I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay, great.
But yeah, thank you again for taking time out of a Saturday morning to talk to us.
A Halloween Saturday morning.
That's right. It's Halloween. Happy Halloween, everybody, and may everyone stay safe and healthy, and maybe wake up in a saner world next week.
Yes, definitely.
All right, take good care, guys.
All right, thank you, sir.
Bye.
Bye. Home run every time, Lilith Hellfire.
I know, he's so just. Ugh.
That's what I. Oh my God, he would never take it, but I would offer that guy a weekly show. I mean, you could talk one of his issues or something he's written every week and not run out of content.
I always forget that he did the Batman Bad Blood movies and things like that. That whole Batman, yeah. I always forget that for some reason.
It's just so much that you always forget.
Yeah, so much.
Because I always remember stuff, and then when we talk to him, I forget, and I was like, "Oh yeah, he did write that." Or yeah,
like I'm not kidding. It's a long list.
When you look. Yeah, I mean, again, since what, at least the '80s, or was he?
And I would love to talk the Justice League International.
Yes.
And the sequel and the spinoff that they did in Europe, because that's like,
yes,
he changed the game because he took that from the dark and gritty to like that comedy, heartfelt kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But again, I mean, it's that, and like I know you have no interest in Captain America, but I'd love to talk to him about his Captain America run. I mean, I hold him up there with Grunwald, and you know how I feel about Grunwald.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear that a lot. So
yeah, he gets these characters, and the man worked with Stan Lee and John Romita Sr.
And he did Conan. Well, that's only 2 issues, but I count it. Well, that's the Savage Sword anyway. He did another Conan back in the mid-'80s, I think it was. Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know if I'll torture him, but I was going to say, I'm going to send him down with you and Charlie Esser for...
oh, he'd never come back. Me and him just asking questions about Conan. That's all we care about.
Well, no. I mean, remember, we did talk to him about Superman Red Sun with Charlie's. And
yeah.
It was good. No, because they started talking about, past Conan stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So anything else, Lilith Hellfire?
No, not at all. Just a great way to start your Halloween,
Right.
I had to go change and take this stupid picture.
That's true. Yeah. Okay. All right. So everyone, this is part of the Ultimate Spider-Cast 100. So if you're listening on the podcast, next up will be me and Ray talking about our the time we talked to Terry Cavanaugh and Howard Mackey about the Clinton, amongst other things. We're going to be playing drops and discussing them. So, yeah.
Nice.
So if you're watching
it's
this,
like a flashback. What do they call those? It's like a clip show.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be coming next week in 1 week. But if you're listening on the podcast, it'll be coming in 2 seconds. So, so I won't do any plugs. But Lilith Hellfire, would you like to do your plugs?
If you want to find me on the internet, Lilith Hellfire over on Twitter, and Lilith Hellfire 86 and Lilith Hellfire 69 over on that, Instagram place. And if you're on TikTok, Lilith Hellfire 69, give a little like, give a little follow. I don't know.
Do a little dance, make a little love, get down, man. All right, well.
Bye, Felicia.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dematteis. Thank you, Lilith.
Pleasure as always.
Yeah, same here. And again, you'll hear me in 2 seconds with Ray. So
the boys are back in town.
Because technically, this is a Scarlet Spider episode. So
technically,
but it's the 100 too. So we had to have Will too.
Thank you for not making it a complete sausage fest.
Oh, no problem. Although I hear you like that. Anyway, all right. On to the Ray, and thank you, Mr. Dematteis, once again.
Into the Spider, Scarlet Spider. There you go.
All right, Lilith. Until next time, swing on back.